Hey, Pastor Josh here. We are reading Mark chapter 8, verses 22 through 26. We're going to be looking for a sin to confess, a promise to claim, an attitude to change, a command to obey, an example to follow. Here, I said all that, and actually we won't see that many today in our text, but let's jump into the reading. Jesus heals a blind man at Bethsaida, and they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. Again, a very good example for us to follow, for us to continually bring our concerns and bring the people that are close to us, people that we're concerned about, whether it's physical problems, whether it's financial problems, whether it is some sort of health problems, to continue to bring that to the Lord, spiritual problems, emotional problems, whatever it is, to bring those folks to the Lord in prayer and beg God, beg Christ to touch them. Beg God to work in their life. It's a good example for us to follow, and that's what they were doing. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" Now, before I keep on, if you were here Sunday morning, we talked about this text briefly, and I kind of made the argument that Mark intentionally has put this story where it is in between the disciples coming to a fuller understanding, coming to greater faith in Jesus Christ, and that this is actually being used as a physical illustration of what God is doing in the hearts of the disciples spiritually. And so the disciples were going through this growing phase of becoming more and more like Christ, and actually becoming more and more to an understanding of who Jesus was. And so just like they were growing in their faith, we see that this blind man actually will grow in his sight. So Jesus asks him, "Do you see anything?" He spits on his eyes, lays his hands on him, and of course we know God, we know Jesus, he's able to do things immediately and take care of it very quickly. But is that what happened? And he looked up, the blind man looked up and said, "I see people, but they look like trees walking." And here is an attitude that we need to change. We want God to fix things very quickly, but that's not how things work. Things are progressive. Things are slowly changing. In fact, his work on our own souls to make us more holy and more like him, that is a slow work. It doesn't happen immediately. And so Jesus heals this man, and the man says, "Well, I see people, but they look like trees walking." So he wasn't quite done with him yet. And of course, Jesus could have immediately done it, but that's not how our spiritual growth works. And if Mark is putting that here to show us physically, it was a physical illustration of what's going on in our heart internally, then that also means that our own personal spiritual sanctification, our own personal growth spiritually is a process. And then we see what Jesus did. Then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. So the second go round, then Jesus puts his hand on him, and he then sees clearly. And of course, we will ultimately be able to understand everything clearly at the end when we are in Christ's presence, after we have died or after Christ comes again. We'll understand things as we should. But in between, we are growing in our understanding, and there are going to be a lot of things about God, about our life, that just seems fuzzy, that seems unclear. Verse 26, "And he sent him to his home, saying, 'Do not even enter the village.'" Again, this goes back to that Markan secret that Mark emphasizes with Jesus. Jesus is telling everybody to not spread the news about him, to be quiet, because every time that happens, there's this big old crowd, and usually the folks that are flocking to him are not folks full of faith or even open to understanding the things of God. They just want to be healed, they just want some food, or they just want some sort of special gift for them. I pray that has been a help to you and a blessing to you, and I'll see you all in the next video.